announcements and let you know that Commissioner Smith is pleased to have you here and glad that he was able to help you and have your meeting here, and is very appreciative of the work you all do. And Cole, you lead a great organization, and all the other leaders of this organization, and so we're glad to have you. He is busy with the auction, and we're having some maintenance things taken care of over there. So I looked back at our text, and Cole, we had it down for the 8th for some reason, but it's okay. It all worked out. We're here, and you can meet here when you need to, and come over to the farm when you need to. So we can always do that. Well, I was telling Derek and the rest, and Jeff and the rest of the guys, that you could do socials. That maybe you do a social there later at some point.
I was actually thinking, whatever day so we had a restaurant for, Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
We had a restaurant for her, but I was like, let's go somewhere more intimate.
Yeah, we could do that. We could do that. You can do. Just let me know. Let's get the details. Okay. Well, we can. By that time, the auction is over, and there's lots of things. But if your meetings where you just have an executive board meeting or a monthly meeting, this is a great facility. Just let me know. We can do that. So, and he sends his best regards. Also, what else did I want to tell you about? I did that. Mr. Smith could not be here, but we'll see you guys again. So, I wanted to, in a word, just talk to you about a few things. First of all, let you know who I am. And Cole asked me to kind of talk about my experience in politics and my life thus far, and kind of what I do now and what I have done. And I don't really like talking about myself, but I can do it. So, but anyway, so first I'll start by letting you know and telling you that my experience with the Young Republicans is deep and long and storied. So I started out in 1996 as a Young Republican. And that year, Senator Helms was running, and no, it would have been 2 years later, but we had Bob Dole was running for president on the ticket at that time. So I was the Wake County county chairman of the Young Republicans. We averaged 100 people at our meetings. And one of my dear friends, Frank Williams, was the kind of the catalyst for that. He and a few others created a huge new following for the Young Republicans in our county. We went on to become the best federation in the country in whatever year that was, a few years later. So then Frank got elected a national assistant treasurer. And then I went on to be elected I was state vice chairman for a while. Then I was elected the the national auditor of Young Republicans. And I served under Dee Binky and Kevin McCarthy, who is now our speaker. I know them both very well. Served in Kevin's administration. Dee went on to marry Paul Sorvino, and so she's now Dee Binky's peers. I call her Dee Binky Soprano, but it's not. Yeah, it's Paul Sorvino's wife. He passed. But anyway, so I flew around the country going to Young Republican things while we were managing campaigns. It was just a glorious, wonderful time to meet other Young Republicans across the country and spend time, get drunk, have dates, just social, being young and social, as well as politically active. And it was just a great time. And, I always like to caution people, let them know that we were Young Republicans, whether we were drinking beer, dating each other, we still had standards. Sometimes our standards got a little weak as far as some of us got a little out of line, but we were never not going to be Young Republicans and act in the way that liberals would act. We drank and we were social, but we were still Republicans. We realized that. So I know a lot about Young Republicans and how the Young Republicans operate. And I'm aged out, I can tell you that, for quite a few years now. So I'm not between the 18 to 40 anymore. But I'm encouraged to see you guys here doing what you're doing, because this is exactly what I was doing around 1998 and years prior, after that. These meetings after work, talking, organizing, seeing how we could help candidates that believe the same things we believed achieve. And so that's very important work. Went on after that, so some of my professional background is, I started out in politics after being in the Young Republicans, working for Senator Helms. But actually, prior to that, I was working for Senator Helms. I might get my sync out of order. But I went to school with Jennifer Knox, who was Jesse Helms' granddaughter, and Robbie Knox. And so I went to elementary school with him and middle school. So I knew Senator Helms, he'd come around. But in 1996, I was like some of you. I was just kind of fed up with what I saw in politics. Now, the story that I tell about me being a Republican comes from my grandparents. So my grandparents, if you guys were probably too young to understand or remember what the Reverend Jerry Falwell and the Reverend Pat Robertson created the moral majority. And so the moral majority was the first time evangelical Christians rose up to become politically active acutely, specifically. Before that, Christian churches were just, they might have had some political talking, but the Christian churches just didn't want to, evangelical Protestant churches just did not want to deal with politics face to face. But Reverend Falwell and Reverend Robertson, decided to organize for President Reagan, Governor Reagan at the time, to organize to help him get elected because they could see the hand of evil just running with Democrats and them not keeping it in check. So my grandparents bought into that heavily. My grandfather was a minister and also a blues singer, but they bought into that heavily. And so that's kind of me as a little young guy watching them do and be who they were and getting politically involved. I became a Reagan Republican. That's what made me a Republican, is watching President Reagan and his grace and his intelligence and his demeanor and his just out flummox the naysayers, just really impressed me. And so I formulated my political life after him and then actually President Bush. I saw President Bush Sr. be a superiorly intelligent person, probably the most qualified man ever to become president of the United States. Held many offices. He maybe if he had one downfall, he was not a charismatic type person. He was more kind of like Commissioner Smith, intensely intelligent, very capable, but they're not small talkers. They're not backslappers. They don't really relax much. Now, everybody makes the decision who they want to be. That couldn't be me. I like to relax and have a beer, put my hair down sometimes after work. But some people are so focused and driven that's who they are. And I can appreciate that in politics. So my grandparents got involved that way. I got involved through them. And when I became an adult, I sought out, in 1996, I walked into the state party headquarters and I said, what is it I can do to be a part of what's going on? Met a young man named D. Stewart, who was one of my best friends now. And D was the executive director of the party then. And at that time, a young man named Richard Hudson was the driver for a man running for lieutenant governor named Dave Ballmer. And so, and D was friends with a guy. I had gone to a program called Boys State, if you've ever heard of that. I am the 53rd governor of North Carolina Boys State. Back when I was 18, that was my first political thing. I had gone to Boys State with a young man named Patrick McHenry. And so D. Stewart was friends with him. I said, oh yeah, I know Patrick. And then got to be friends with Richard Hudson. And, so now, how would I know 30 years from from then, Patrick McHenry is a congressman from North Carolina, has been for the last 20 some years. Richard Hudson's a congressman from North Carolina, has been for those 20 some odd years. And a lot of my friends that I started with back in that time have gone on to serve as elected officials from North Carolina. Kevin McCarthy, who I told you I know, Speaker Mohr, and I shared a room at the 1999 National Convention. And he and I were on the floor together to see the happenings there and get George Bush Jr. Nominated. And see, he and I were there together, along with Representative Jason Sain, who is also a very dear friend of mine. So I'm not name dropping. There's just a lot of people, a lot of these guys I started out with, I've known them all their lives.
When you were Senator Helms, did you know David Rouser was going to?
Yes, I did. David Rouser, I've probably known David Rouser longer than almost anybody in politics, because when I started in 1996, he was just a young, advanced man, policy guy for Senator Helms on ag issues. And so, oh yes, and after the campaign, I worked on the campaign first. After the campaign, I went to Washington and worked as a Senate aide in the Foreign Relations Committee. So under Senator Helms for 2 years. I got to meet Joe Biden at that time, who was a very different man then than he is now. Very different. So anyway, he was actually somebody we could work with then. But so that's also part of my career. I went on to work for Senator Helms, and then came back home and worked for this organization right here, the John Locke Foundation. And I was the assistant director of operations, of administration, excuse me, under a young lady named Marilyn Avila. Seems like everybody I meet becomes elected to something. So I don't know. Well, let me tell you. Well, I don't know what magic it is, but I'll rub it off on you, Jeff. If you can have some, my friend, all of you can have some. And so Representative Avila, and I'm leaving out some others. I will tell you that I served on the North Carolina Human Relations Commission 10 years ago under Pat McCrory. We were both appointed there. So I got to know him. He's a dear friend of mine. And so those are some of the things I've done in politics. I am a business consultant, a management consultant. So I specialize in management. I went to Campbell University and got my degree in public policy there, studied public policy and management. And also have assisted living management and nonprofit management. What I do for the Fred Smith Corporation now is I am the CEO of the Fred Smith Company Foundation, where we give away money and beef, mostly beef now. But during the pandemic, Fred gave away money to people in need. And so we organized around that. And we give beef to organizations that are faith-based, and that they have to be faith-based, have to be local, and they give out food, protein to the poor. So that's what he believes in. That's the way it should be, that private organizations choose to help either faith-based or whatever. Just it's better done when the private sector does it. And I can tell you, he's as efficient as it. We don't waste. We don't overindulge. People get what they need the way they're supposed to, out of the hand of generosity. So that's what I do for the Fred Smith Corporation. I'm also his political aide. He's county commissioner, and I ran his campaign for county commissioner as the campaign manager. And so that's where we are with that. But if I wanted to make a couple of points about just my political philosophy and what I see and what I have seen over the last 30 years, and Derek and I were having a conversation before we began. And it was funny because the conversation was centered around what I wanted to talk about. And by the way, and this is not name dropping again, but it's germane to what I have to say. When I worked at the John Locke Foundation, worked under a young man named John Hood. And I know John very well. He was my direct boss. And there was also a young man there named Don Carrington, who I learned a lot about. I learned a lot from. And there was a young man there also named Tom Fetzer. So, these guys are but the reason I mention them is because my political thinking is shaped by these guys are older than I am. It's shaped by the things I learned from John and Don. John Hood knows the state of North Carolina, its budget, its issues, and its policies better than anybody else in this state. He knows it. He has, since he left Carolina, he's only had one job. Left Carolina, he was introduced to Mark Rotterman and John Pope, and Art Pope, John's son, started the Pope Foundation. They created the Locke Foundation, and that was the beginning of statewide policy intelligence in the state of North Carolina. So Fetzer was the director of Local Innovation, Center for Local Innovation, which was a center devoted to local town and commission issues since he was a mayor. So I learned from these guys, and here's my point. So what I learned from these guys, and I'll say Don Carrington is one of the best investigative reporters for conservatives we've ever had. Don Carrington is very good at getting to the point, getting elected officials to get to the point about state issues. My point about state government and state policy is this. Derek and I were talking, and I mentioned to him that what I've learned is that the best elected officials focus on two things: first and foremost, you have to understand the scope of your office. You can't swallow a whale. A whale can't swallow the entire ocean. And being an elected official is about setting priorities and making decisions. And I'm looking for politicians who are setting the kind of priorities I would align with. I don't expect my county commissioner to be my political philosopher. I want the county commissioner to focus on county issues. I want my state representative to focus on state representative issues, state issues that may interact with county issues and local issues. But I don't need my state representative talking to me about the border wall. You don't have much scope there. I don't need you really talking too much about the national budget because you need to know about state budget issues. So, and then elected officials who understand water, sewer, public safety, and the things that are in their scope. I need elected officials to know those things intelligently. And so I like to, when I have, I've been also a lobbyist and I've done some things like that. I talk to elected officials, a lot of whom are my friends, and I say, listen, you've got to cut some issues out. And you've got to talk about and become expert as you can on the issues within your scope that you have influence on, that you're going to vote on. And I know that you believe in national security and the border wall and all. That's great. So do I. But I hired you as a person in the state of North Carolina to be a state representative from this district to handle those issues. And some politicians have trouble with that. So that's one thing that I push for. And also, what I talk about lately is the integrity of intellectual information. That's so key. We have got to make sure that we have confidence and trust in where we're getting our sources of information from, because it's too easy to put up a bunch of hooey online, and then someone at home who is just not thinking very intelligently can believe that and can be led astray. This happens on both sides of the aisle. So, we want to make sure that when Newt Gingrich talked about kitchen table issues. Most folks that I also sell beef, most people that I sell beef and livestock to, they don't really care about the border wall. They do, but they don't care about what's going on over in China. God bless those folks over there. If there's a hurricane or an earthquake, wish them well. They don't want to hear about that. They want to hear about the price they're paying for eggs. They want to hear about where their children are going to school. They want to know about the things that affect them. And so to the extent that our elected officials are elected, they've got to focus on those things. Now, I am a Christian. I will forever be a Christian. I am a minister. I'm an ordained minister. I've had churches. And I'm going to represent Christian people in a Christian way. I'm going to represent myself in a Christian way. I don't have a problem with people who are Muslim or whatever other religion they are, because we live in America. But anyone who would look in my direction would know that I am a Christian person, and I'm going to represent those issues because we're free to do that in America. I'm not condemning anyone else because of what they believe or who they are. That's you make your choices. Like I tell my son, being a man is not about toting a gun. Can you fight? Any of the crap the young people believe. It's about making decisions and living with the consequences. That's what a man does. You use your intelligence to make the best decisions for your family you possibly can. And when you make those decisions to their betterment or sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't. You have to live with and adjust with the consequences and not whine and complain, go to the government and say, well, I can't take care of my family. Can you? You're a man. If you decided to drink all weekend and lost your job because you could not keep a job, you made those decisions. You got to live with the consequences, just on a basic level. So, extrapolate that up into politics. When we make decisions to build parks and give away money and support countries that don't like us and things like that, but we have public safety problem at home, or we don't have money to fund our schools. Well, some politicians somewhere made those decisions, and we have to hold them accountable for that. That's the correct thing to do, is to election them out of office and election them into office when they do the right things, or keep them in office when they do the right things and get them out of there when they don't. That's how we operate in America. So I'm encouraged by what I see. And when I see all of you out at your age, you could be doing a lot of other things. You could be enjoying your family. You could be relaxing, luxuriating, or just spending all the money you make every day. But you're concerned and you care and you take time to be concerned about America. And we need more of that. I think one of the great things that President Trump has done, and I support him. I don't like everything he does, but the thing I like the most about him is he's a man of strength. He projects strength. America has to remain strong. And I'll take a president who's just a little too potent than one that's weak and feckless and apologizing, like Obama and like other presidents. I cannot abide that. I cannot abide, because America is a good nation. We do more good and have done more good than any other nation on this earth, and we get no thanks for it. But you know what? I don't want the president of the United States to be the guy who takes down, because he's got to hold the line. I don't know if you guys saw, Harry Truman's one of my favorite presidents, even though he's a Democrat. Harry Truman was probably the most unlikely guy to ever be president of the United States. But the presidency didn't change him. Harry Truman was a man who was forthright, direct, and he got things done. He was not afraid. So, come on in, buddy. How you doing? But this is what I see in politicians now that dismays me. I see politicians who are, come on in, have a seat, man. No, just have plenty to drink. I'm almost done talking, by the way. This is discussion, and I'm through with the speech making. But I'm encouraged to see you. I will always be here to help you, whatever I can do. Let me know if it's this meeting space, social space, whatever we have to do. We'll get it done. And I looked at your leadership, Cole. I'm proud of you, what you're doing, how you do. I see you getting around in the county. As young as you are, you could be chasing all those girls over there in NC State that are giving you the eye.
He's trying to do that.
Yeah, I know. Well, he gets enough attention himself, I'm sure. But yet you're here on a Thursday afternoon talking about political issues. So I applaud all of you for that. And thank you. Thank you. Appreciate you. All right. Yes, sir.
I actually got
Any questions? Yeah, ask me. Yeah.
And if you don't want to answer.
No, I love questions.
So I'm actually from Kevin McCarthy's district.
Are you?
I interned very briefly for his office, but I haven't really.
So you know him well.
Not exactly.
Well, you know his way well.
And that was actually what I wanted to ask. Is a lot of us were pretty upset with the debt ceiling, and that was what's he like personally, and why would he allow something like that? Because just for those of you who don't know, basically there was a debt ceiling deal. McCarthy chose not to do any sort of default and did what's called a continuing resolution. So he raised the debt ceiling not for more than he didn't do a cap.
Mm-hmm.
So he was in a position to either negotiate for a lot of cuts or make it come up again during the election cycle of next year, presidential one. He did neither. So a lot of us, including myself, were fairly upset, and just for some context, more Democrats voted for that budget that was passed than Republicans. So, what's kind of your sense of that situation? It's hard
Sure.
to not be mad.
Sure. And I understand that. I get that. So, first of all, I'll tell you that Kevin McCarthy, I don't know nearly anyone who is as political as Kevin McCarthy. When he was trying to become Speaker of the House, I was so confident because I know what shrewd a political mind he is. I watched him ascend to be he was the national Republican chairman of the National Republicans, and I served under him. I watched him maneuver his way very effortlessly to get that job. Kevin McCarthy, no one else could be Speaker right now but Kevin McCarthy. I'm telling you, I don't like everything he does. Trust me. And you're from California, so I'm going to say this. And my Southern brothers know this. He is a California Republican. Okay, that has a different context, particularly for people from the South. We don't see California Republicans quite the same way. Even though we love Reagan, Reagan was kind of transcended California Republicanism, but since Reagan, California Republicans are kind of seen as, so it's like, but what I can tell you about McCarthy is McCarthy, if there's not another person who could have managed all of those tangled cords. No, and he barely did it. So what I see in that is I see McCarthy, first of all, trying to survive. He's got, well, and it's not personal. He's got to, because he's got the kind of skills that can help us achieve. I think anyone else as speaker would be a little too sharp, a little too, we would go through the days. I don't know if you guys were old enough to remember the days where we had Livingston as chairman as speaker for 2 days. And we were kind of revolving around the speaker. There was a coup and that, we got nothing done for 2 years. This was the last 2 years of Clinton's presidency. Anyway, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on. We didn't look too good, and we lost our pluralities for a while. But I think Kevin is just trying to hold the ground under his feet right now until things calm down. You noticed yesterday the inquiry into the impeachment of the president has begun. So that's something I'm sure that Kevin wasn't for at first, but I know he had to make that deal with the caucus, right? So the MAGA, that's what they want. He has now given that to him. So it's give and take. That's one thing in politics we got to keep in mind. The founders never intended for one side to have all the power. Never. That's just not the way they intended it. They intended for the people's attitude to be reflected in the Congress. So, there's checks and balances. So McCarthy's got to manage having a sane person be speaker, because if some of the other elements of the party become speaker, things will get out of control. But Kevin is uniquely qualified for that job. No, I did not like the deal he made with the debt ceiling. I was dismayed with that. But hopefully, when the ground under his feet is firmer, we can always come back and redress these things. So what that's going to take is he's got to be speaker a year, then he's got to go through this next election cycle, and then after we reelect President Trump, things are quieter, calmer, we have control, and we've got more say, more clout. We can achieve the thing. That's how politics works. If you could just drive through and get everything you wanted, well, we wouldn't really be a democracy. So you've got to negotiate and deal with the other side. So I see that. I see that as Kevin's hand. But Kevin is. I'll say it to his face. He's a California Republican. We could have done a lot worse. We could have got somebody really, 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 really liberal as speaker. But I'm glad he's there.
I don't want to. I can ask.
No, please.
Now, and I know you're a little out of the. There's again. This is just. Oh, he's controlled by special interest. Because venture firms and stuff. How true is a lot of that? And kind of what you.
I don't know that that's as true as I know that when you're a congressman from Southern California, one that is elected by the plurality, he was elected as smart and as intelligent as he is, in a state as rich as California, all of those Congress people, how many are there? 23 of them, Congress people from California get courted by the biggest entities in the world, biggest corporations, countries. They all entertain the face of other countries, Apple, all the big companies. So they're going to get courted by all the extra special interests. I think Kevin is kind of like President Trump. I think President Trump can play that game. They can play the game with big interests, big government, big business. And not every congressman is suited for that. If you're a congressman from Nebraska and you just deal with corn, you're not really going to know how to talk to the vice president of Ethiopia, who's got a lot of, or the vice president or president of SAS. Right. So I think he can synthesize those relationships well. I don't think he's in the pocket or owned by big business. I surely hope not. I don't have any way of knowing if that's actually the truth, but I don't perceive Kevin as being bought that way, from what I know, and I've worked closely with him. I don't see him as being bought that way, but you never know what's going on behind closed doors.
And then kind of a third question. You've kind of been in, and you mentioned this before we started. Like it feels like we hate each other a lot, you know. And is that pervasive through? Is it like a good heuristic, a good way of kind of looking at this? Like, let's say we're talking Johnston County. If you're taking a like infrastructure project, if you're discussing that issue, you probably couldn't tell who's a Democrat or Republican. It's like, oh, okay, well, we got to raise this much taxes, this, and if we make this, you would lose like the political boundaries pretty quick if you were actually like solving problems. Now it just feels like gridlock on purpose. We hate each other. I'm a white supremacist.
Name calling, sure.
Yeah. Like, how pervasive is that, and how much worse? That's
a good question, and really, I'm glad you asked that, because that's another. If you don't hear or remember anything that I've said tonight, please, I like for people to understand this point, this context. We have got to get in a space where we can talk intelligently about issues and be, I don't want to say, when I say tolerant of the other side, I'm not saying giving in to their issues. I'm saying when the voters of Johnston County or the voters of North Carolina have elected a Democratic governor, a Republican House, a Democratic Senate, they've got to talk. And we can't be repulsed by the presence of the other side. We've got to hold fast on our issues and our principles. You can do that. I can do that comfortably, relaxed, and I can tell the biggest liberal, I don't agree with you, and you've got to find some common ground with me if we've got to make an issue on state policy. I don't hate you. We can have lunch. We can discuss issues. No, I'm not going to your gay pride parties. I'm not doing any of that. I'm not doing it. But when we meet at the table of these issues and the people have elected us to come up with solutions, we're compelled to do so. We should be. And I hate the fact that we demonize each other just because we don't agree. Now, in a private setting, when it's just us, we're all Republicans, you can say what you want to say. It's America. We jokingly. But at the table of public policy, I need serious focus, faces. I need serious minds, sober minds to challenge and face the problems of North Carolina. And I might have to deal with a transgender person who's been elected from Chapel Hill. Listen, fine. But I'm not changing, because this is what I'm going to vote for and this is what I'm not going to vote for. So let's find avenues where we can discuss. Senator,
do that when they come to the table, that same kind of mindset. I'm not going to vote for this, and so I'm not going to vote for that. How do you come to the table?
well, you just say, my constituencies has elected me to represent these issues. And sometimes, Cole, it's not possible to come to a consensus at that time.
Jim Berger is?
Very well.
So, like, that guy is a staunch, hardcore.
Sure is.
So if we didn't have the supermajority, and let's say he was the Senate Majority Leader, or he was still Berger's spot, and he's going over to Governor Cooper's office, and we know how Governor Cooper is. Well, let's say Josh Stein. How does a Jim Berger and Josh Stein come together? We don't have a supermajority.
Well, and that's a good question. What I'd like to see happen is that Jim Bergen and Josh Stein, if it would ever be a dynamic like that, both realize Jim Bergen's got to represent his constituency. Josh Stein has to represent his. We got to come up with a solution, or we got to say, I wouldn't expect Josh Stein to just give in. But here's where the problem really comes in. And you work at the legislature, Jeff, you know how this is. The problem comes in to play when people start compromising for personal reasons, or because they're trying to achieve something that's out of the scope of what they've been elected to do. I tell you, if I were ever elected to be in the state house or the state senate, I would spend as little time there as possible. I would not luxuriate in the office. I go there to cast a vote, to attend the meetings, to get educated, and so that I can vote. But a lot of people go up to Raleigh and get mesmerized and charmed by the aura of it all. And so they can be persuaded because someone uses something of leverage to say, well, maybe you get a committee spot if you listen. Public service should not be a career goal. It should not be an aspiration. It should be something people ask you to do. I'm not against people who say, well, I think I have qualifications, I can serve, and I'd like to serve. But if no one's asking you to run for stuff or saying, you know what, you should do that. If you don't have people behind you, you need to find some folks to do that, to say, at least get some friends and say, what do you think? Am I going to be good at this? So that you represent them. And so, to answer your question, sometimes there has to be stalemates. And, and that's politics. The problem is not our system. I always have to correct people. It's not, we don't need to change the Constitution. Even though I'm not talking about the Convention of States, that's all in line with what the Constitution says we can do. But I don't think we need to change the Constitution, realign the Supreme Court. Our system of government is the best one ever made. It's the people in it. We've got to make sure that the people that get there, that's another thing I like to talk about, is the fact that we don't hire candidates or elected officials who are the test metal who can really address issues. The caliber of the average county commissioner, state house representative, not to put them down, some of them just aren't tuned into the issues. And if it weren't for staff like Jeff, they'd be lost. It's like, I don't, of course, I understand a state house member or state senator who relies on their staff, but you know what? I need you working as hard as they are. I need you studying the issues, digging down in the numbers. Now, like my boss, Fred Smith, I can promise you right now, Fred Smith is head deep in some numbers about the county or his business. He is the most on-task person I know. He's always on task. Now, that's how he lives his life. Like I said, everybody makes the decision to do that. But when the people of Johnston County hired him, they really hired a guy who's going to get down in the weeds and find out what he did. Senator Helms did that. Senator Helms used to tell, the one thing I remember he used to tell me, he said, you have to know the rules to change them. So you can't go into the legislature and say, God, I want to change everything. You don't know any of the rules. Because you can't just bowl through. You gotta get involved, get meshed into the process, learn it, and then you can work to change the rules. Jason Sane does that. He's very good at that. He's a rules man. And so what Senator Helms did the first year he was elected to the Senate, 72, I believe. They wanted to give him all these fancy committee assignments. He said, no, put me on rules. I want to be on rules so I can learn the rules. And he became a master of the rules. And he parlayed that into being agriculture agriculture chairman and Senate Foreign Relations chairman. Like, why would Jesse Helms ever be on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee? I mean, he's from a big state, but he doesn't have any credentials like that. Well, he knew the rules. He knew that he needed to get on that committee and that a time of attrition would put him in line after so many elections to be the chairperson. And so in the 90s, he was the chairperson for a long time. A great chairperson, Senate Foreign Relations Committee. They feared us in China and in Iraq because they knew Helms was back there. They knew he was smart and a little bit unpredictable. The same thing with President Trump. They know President Trump is smart and a lot unpredictable. And that creates force that we need in America. So if for no other reason than alone I support President Trump, is because I know he's going to resemble and symbolize a strong America. This guy we've got now, Biden, I don't even know if he's alive. I don't know. I mean, I know, and Joe Biden, when I worked in the Foreign Relations Committee, he was not that way. He was a guy that could be dealt with. He kind of bought into a lot. Years ago, he was kind of a conservative Democrat, but then he started buying into this wing of the party that's just like, let's do all this liberal agenda, and let's be apologetic, and let's just kowtow to our enemies. And
crime debt.
Yeah.
That thing actually didn't. It actually hurt African Americans more than it helped.
Right. That's exactly right. But it was crime in America. I tell the truth. Let me tell you something. If 50% of the people, or let me say 70% of the people creating crime are people with blonde hair. Okay, then it makes sense to watch people with blonde hair, doesn't it? I mean, if yellow labs are out here shooting people, and then you know what? Police ought to probably keep an eye on them if they're doing their job. So that's what I say about intellectual, intelligent information. We got to hold on to reality. We've got to make sure. The left tries to divert our attention. They like to take racial issues and divert our attention, get us way off course. They do it with minorities very well. They take a racial issue and skew it, something that's not even a racial issue, and make it that way. And they've put America on the back foot that way. And I despise that. I despise the use of that, because this is the land of the free. This is the land of opportunity. It doesn't matter who you are, what race you are, what socioeconomic position you come from. If you can't make it in America, then you just don't want to. You're not trying. You go to Nigeria, you go to Finland, or anywhere, Kuala Lumpur. These people live in places there are no opportunities, and they're trying to get here. So I talk to young people and I tell them all the time, be thankful you live in America. Don't make apologies. America should do what's in its best interest. I'm sorry. I want a president that's going to do that. I want a governor that's going to do that for our state. I want state members and House members. I want elected officials to do what's in America's best interest. Not going over to China. I hate the fact that if I looked at about 90% of things in here, it's got China on there. We got to stop that. We got to change that. We have cheated the American people out of prosperity that way. Now it's like I tell my son, your generation, he likes to sleep to 2 o'clock.
How do you do that when, like, today, I'm telling Jeff, do you want to cover your ears for this?
Sure.
Well, if you guys didn't know, his LA endorsed our opponent.
The hardest of
everyone here is for Luke except for Jeff.
That's all right. He works at the legislature.
Yeah.
We'll get the rest of them though.
Yeah. So I was telling Luke, I was like, hey, go make a video, because in California they just passed a $2 minimum wage. So how do you compete with that while still making the values cheaper? I mean, because you sell beef, everyone wants that bottom line. And obviously you want to pay your employees what they're worth, but you don't want to, at the same time, if they're doing a shit job, they don't deserve $2 an hour.
You got that right. And I'll explain it to you this way, Cole. It's like I tell my son. So in China, the average family in China lives in a room, maybe an apartment the size of this room. In that apartment, there's probably a grandmother and a grandfather, great aunt, 1 or 2 kids, and they each have 1 set of clothes, maybe 1 or 2 pairs of shoes, and a little small place of grass out there they sit. 2 or 3, one family composed of extended family. And they go to work every day for about $3 an hour, comparatively, making something that they're selling to us that some American company owns. And they're satisfied with that because they live in a country that tells them they should be satisfied with that. And they're conditioned now to be satisfied. So it's not even a fallacy anymore. That's what they don't have, the kind of needs of stuff that we have. Meanwhile, in America, we've got storage facility containers everywhere popping up because we all have too much stuff. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, because our nation has given the world the greatest prosperity it's ever seen. We've given it the greatest technology it's ever seen. We've given our country has given the world a prosperity and a life that our innovation for capitalism created. So I don't apologize for the fact that all of us have a little too much. Our country worked hard for a long time to get in the position we're in. But in China, there's 2 billion of them. And in India, there's 3 billion of them. 3.5, 2.5, they're neck and neck. But meanwhile, our kids will not go to McDonald's and sign up for a $600 advancement fee to make $15 an hour because they don't want to do that. We can't compete on the world stage against the Chinese and the Indians who are working for $3 an hour and are satisfied with it if we don't outwork them and outperform them. So how we fix that, Cole, is we've got to get back to the principles of capitalism where we are smarter than they are, we outwork them. And our politicians have got to stop giving it to them. I grew up in an America where China was ascending. And one of my biggest problems with Congress at the time and President Bush at the time is NAFTA just gave it to them. Just gave it to them. And in capitalism, when I was in college, I realized that in order to have a healthy capitalistic society, you can't just have educated elites at the top and non-workers poor at the bottom. You've got to have a huge middle of blue class workers who are not college educated, but who make money making stuff that our countries, our companies sell to us and the rest of the world. That's how you have a healthy capitalistic system. The problem with the Chinese is they participate in capitalism, but they cheat. They revalue their currency all the time. They rejig things. They don't pay any attention. Like when America comes to the table and says, we've got a deal, we have a treaty, everybody signs it, we all agree to abide by those terms of the treaty. The Chinese may abide with it for a year, then they just say, no, we're not doing it anymore. They don't have any respect for rules. And how do you compete against a cheater?
Yeah,
Yes.
there's a lot of
Yes.
structural things that they do too. So like environmental compliance, not a thing.
Mm-mm.
You know, like safety. There's no such thing as OSHA. You know,
Mhm.
like also they incentivize like bringing along. So there's a lot of things we can do. And I think a lot of it is who we send to college, how much we send them, what they learn. Now you're so burdened with that, which is really kind of our generation. Versus, like, I think it is very fixable. And yeah, I really think a lot of those jobs should be.
I think you're right. You're exactly right about that. I had a customer of mine, a beef customer of mine, tell me last week, he's from Russia and his wife is Ukrainian. So they live in a very interesting household. But, but you know what he told me? He was the guy that educated me. He told me, he said, you know what? He said, dial back a little bit on this whole Ukrainian thing's right. He said, you don't live in Russia. He's like, Ukraine is only slightly less bad in Russia. He's like, that's a very corrupt society. It's a very, very, very mob-like society. There are no saints over there in Ukraine. You know, so the liberal left has got us thinking that Ukraine is just this great, oh God, the poor Ukrainians. I'm not saying Russia should have invaded them and taken them over and killed all those people. But, you know, it's like the devil and his brother fighting. What side do you pick? You know, so, and it's like, but what he told me is, and I asked him, I said, well, why is it that, you know, over in Russia, that the Russian people don't get rid of Vladimir Putin and don't believe all that they like him? He said, well, you know what? Nobody in Russia is going bankrupt because of medical bills. None of them. He said, they have health care. I don't know how they're paying for it. He said, but Vladimir Putin provides health care for them and they can keep their money and stuff. So this is going to be the challenge of Cole and his generation. They're going to have to defend capitalism. At the same time, socialism is saying, well, you know what? All our people over here. Now, there's fewer people in Russia than America, but their people are well-fed, they have health care, they're educated, and they don't have to go bankrupt to do it. Meanwhile, in America, you get cancer and you've got to wipe out your bank account to do it, and that money doesn't come back to you. You go to college and spend $200,000, and you got to pay that money back, and you're strapped with debt for the rest of your life, and you can't get ahead that way. Meanwhile, in Russia, education is free, and not a bad one. I mean, it's not the best education in the world, but certainly not the worst in Russia. They're pretty smart. And like I said, their healthcare, they've solved the problem.
Yeah, so what you do is, this is like supply and demand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
You either have a very few amount of people go to
Mm-hmm.
college, or if you have a bunch, then you can't pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they have much less people. Oh, Germany. They have a
Right.
similar system.
I did too.
Yeah, where it's basically like public universities are actually the best
Uh-huh.
ones, not the private.
Not the
ones.
private ones.
But maybe 10 go to college spouse.
Mm-hmm.
And then everybody else goes to, if you're a machinist, you work for BMW,
And see,
whatever.
that's that middle, that
Yeah.
blue collar middle. We have pushed everybody to college, and Cole, you're new to college, but you will find people. You probably are beginning to see people who are in college classes who have no business there at all. They really shouldn't be there. They should be working at a job somewhere, becoming someone who can make things, or doing the things that they're
Yeah,
strengths.
it's just not for everyone. It's just not for everyone.
I would argue college is not.
I would say that too. I would say that, but we don't need everybody in college.
Those degrees will
Right.
Google, YouTube.
But here's the rub though, in terms of what it requires a degree. We've kind of done some of this to ourselves.
We've done it to, see, everybody thought NAFTA, the flaw in NAFTA was the people in NAFTA who created NAFTA thought that what we'll do is we'll educate everybody in America, we'll push them to college degrees, and America will be the corporate headquarters for every company in the world, and then we'll off-ship the production offline, offshore, and let them produce stuff for $3 an hour. We'll all get rich because we're the corporate headquarters, and let the production be over there. It's not the way capitalism works. They're becoming rich because there's so many more of them producing, they can sell to themselves as well as the rest of the world and become wealthy, participating in capitalism and not being capitalistic. So the challenge is going to be to people in your generation, Cole. You all have got to make a case for capitalism better, because I have kids that I mentor sometimes who look at socialism and go, that's interesting. That never happened when I was a kid. We were completely against socialism. We knew it didn't work, because I remember the time when I was a boy in the early 80s, late 70s, we used to see ABC News would put on the air every night, people in Russia standing in line for hours waiting for toilet paper because their system of government did not work for them. You go in a Russian grocery store, and there's one or two of every product that you need. Soap, one or two companies. Shampoo, one or two companies. You don't have much choice. You go to Walmart over here, there's 2 aisles of shampoo from every kind of company in the world. If you are a person, a guy, you think, man, I know how to make shampoo in my house, and I believe it, and I got the best one in America, you can go get a patent, or you can go to the people that make shampoo and you say, I got the best one, put me on the market, and you can become a millionaire doing that. In Russia, the government chooses. We don't like these companies over here. Putin is a billionaire. He can make a deal with someone in America and say, only your shampoos will be sold in Russia. And that's, they choose for you. And so your generation, Cole, has got to make a better, you're going to have to do more convincing of the general populace in America that capitalism still works, and it does, but only to the degree we participate. You got to work hard to make capitalism work. What our young people your age want to do, and I applaud you for not being one of them, but what the young people now want to do, they don't want to do anything. They want to do nothing. They want to stay home and do nothing, yet they want everything in return. So the idea of the government paying for your health care, paying for your college education, paying for your housing, that appeals to them, which is repulsive to me. Because I grew up in a time where we knew we had to work hard. We wanted to get out and work, be whatever it is your skills allow you to be. But these kids they want nothing, they want to be nothing, but they want everything in return. So you guys are going to have to you're going to have to say, look, dude, that's not the way to go. You've got to contribute to America and the world capitalistic society for it to work, or else the oligarchs of the world, China, India, to a degree, Russia, are going to start making our kids think they should have that system of government. And one of the things that scares me the most is some of our people like to play with the Civil War. They like to say, well, if President Trump doesn't get elected, or the things that, I think we should take up arms and have a civil war. One of the things they forget is that, or one thing they think may happen subconsciously, is that America may descend into a civil war. I can't guarantee you it won't. But if we do, China and Russia are just going to sit back and let America fight it out. They'll figure it out. We'll watch. That's not how it works. If America descends into a civil war, the Chinese are going to put their strength and muscle and power and money behind whoever is doing their best interest. If it's us, if it's the Democrats, if they're not going, they're going to want to they're going to want to expedite our demise. Whatever is going to make us implode. Now, we like to think of of a civil war as a realignment. Okay, we get to make things new and make things better. That's really not the way wars work. Now, this convention of the states is an orderly way to do that. I'm not saying I'm for it or I'm not saying I'm against it, but I do think it's working within the system. That's the way it's supposed to work. Let's get a groundswell in the states to say, hey guys, we got some stuff that we need to take to a constitutional level. Let's have a national meeting about it and put some of this stuff in line. Because if we send delegates for a constitutional convention, that's how the founders intended for us to solve our problems, so that we don't have a bloody war that we don't know what the outcome will be. So we're a smart nation. Our country is smart. So smart people can get in a room and say, look, there's some things about the Constitution we need to change, a lot we need to keep, but some of the stuff we need to change. We need term limits. But we've been fighting for 30 years for term limits. I believe in them. I don't think there should be people who go up to Washington and just decrepit up there, who just decay in office. I'm strongly. Now, I'm not saying that older people aren't smart or that some of them should serve at times.
Chuck Grassley,
Great senator. And not only Chuck Grassley, Mitch McConnell is a great senator. Okay, I don't care what they tell you.
Well, basketball then.
Well, Mitch McConnell is he was a student of Helms, served under Senator Helms when he was a senator, and learned everything he knows from Senator Helms. He'll tell you that. But oh yes,
if not even more.
Even a lot more so. But Senator not Grassley, who did I was just talking about? McConnell. But Senator McConnell and Senator Feinstein, you got health issues. Even if you are smart and you're still with it, it doesn't look like you are. And then people can question, were you really genuine in the decision you made? Now, his staff will tell you he's brilliant, he's still good. But you know what? You deserve a retirement. What is it that you can't pass on the baton after having been there 30 years? I just don't understand it.
Is that Senator Helms gonna quit?
Well, Senator Helms was pretty spry up until, but that's exactly right, Cole. When Senator Helms decided that he would not run again, I think the man wanted to enjoy some time not being a senator after having been one for 30 some years. He wasn't so married to the job that it was his personality. It wasn't him. He could live a life without being a senator. Some of these people go to Washington and they have become something they cannot become again. And it's like, I don't want politicians I don't want monarch-minded politicians. They try to pass it to their kids. But, if you got a kid like Hunter Biden, you know what? He should be nowhere near government. And see, that's what Joe Biden thought. I bet you in Joe Biden's mind, somewhere about 10 years ago, he thought, you know what? I'm going to try to be president, and then Hunter can be president. They don't want him. He doesn't want to be president of the United States. But my God, we barely want, listen, that's just not where we are. This is in England. We don't have monarchy here. We don't even have a titular one. We have a president who works for us. We have a governor that works for us. So, that's kind of a bit of my philosophy. And, I'll be around. All of you can have my cell phone number. Cole has it. Call me if you need me, if I can help in any way. No, I don't rule out running for office, but kind of doesn't appeal to me as much as it used to. I kind of like, my personal private time, trying to help my son stay on the right track, and, just being a private citizen. But, I facilitate until I have to lead. A friend of mine, Jason Lemons, who is on the school board in Harnett County, would be a great legislator. He was like, you know what? Everything's not about, politics. Have a life other than politics. Live politics, be qualified to be a candidate, to be an elected official, but I need to know that you've got other interests as well. That's important to me. So.
Clayton Cross.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Good point.
And anytime you guys want to meet in this room, if it's your executive meeting or if you want to just have a party or just your monthly meeting, let me know. And you now know where it is, how it is, what you got here is facility. So I can just say, here, Cole, is the key. Come and then make sure you clean up, and you can use that. Fred doesn't mind that, and I live in Riverwood, so that we can get this on my dime or his. It didn't cost anything, but I can sign up with Trisha anytime, or Fred can say, make it happen. So take us up on that. All right, great.